The moment the promise was made, the collapse had already begun, because what if the silence was never meant to last at all?
Breaking today, Meghan Markle breaks her agreement with King Charles and Buckingham Palace to leak to her friends at People magazine less than a week after that promised meeting.
On Harry's mind is Harry and Meghan, and on Meghan's mind is Meghan, and sometimes Harry.
Most definitely. Well, it's my view that she's pathologically transactional, and she's American. As you know, Americans don't like losers.
Everybody in the family now understands that Meghan is an adversary and needs to be treated as such.
Confused and angry, spoiled brat can never admit he was wrong, can never admit that he's, done a terrible thing in bringing this entire losing case and wasting perhaps £50 million in legal costs.
Anybody who leaves their so-called loving partner to face the world's media alone when you've lost a mega court case is certainly not somebody standing by you. And you will also notice what was interesting, that even though they knew about the Emmy nomination,
she had just one simple rule: keep the secrets completely silent. But she broke that promise in less than 48 hours. Now everything she worked so hard to protect has completely fallen apart. It sounds simple, almost harmless on the surface. A quiet agreement, a private understanding, one condition that held everything together: silence, absolute silence. But when that silence shattered in less than 48 hours, it didn't just expose a conversation, it exposed a pattern. And suddenly what looked like reconciliation started to feel like something else entirely. Something calculated, something premeditated. Because how does something so sensitive, so tightly held, unravel so quickly unless the unraveling was already planned?
Reporting directly contravenes what Prince Harry and Meghan Markle had agreed with the palace, which was that there was to be no briefing around this visit to try and shape the narrative in favour of one party. But she can't help herself, can she? So this is the cover report where People says the Duchess planned to be by her husband's side for several outings,
speaking up to defend her, and many people now believe William's warnings may have had a point. William tried to tell everyone, not through a dramatic showdown, not with shouting or ultimatums. He simply believed something was off. From the very beginning, he seemed to notice details that others ignored. He watched her approach unfold. He saw what he believed was a clear pattern developing. And when King Charles was reportedly considering a meeting with her, William's message was clear: don't do this alone. Looking back, many now feel that warning deserves another look. William didn't raise alarms loudly. That's what makes it unsettling. No confrontation, no dramatic scenes, just quiet observation, careful attention, a growing sense that something didn't align. And that silence from William, was it restraint or was it certainty? Because when someone watches instead of reacts, it usually means they've already seen enough to predict what comes next, enough to know how the story ends before anyone else realizes it has even begun.
William was very much across the meeting. He knew exactly why the king wanted to do it. He wasn't having any of it, not interested, but understood. And it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning about the monarchy, how you have to be careful because the king is the king is the king. You get the picture.
But being right while everyone else is hoping for the best often means no one wants to listen. People want to believe in second chances. They want to believe that kindness can change everything. So when William warned that he believed this person couldn't be trusted, and when he tried to protect his brother, many people brushed to the side. Now some are looking back at those warnings in a very different way, because hope can be blinding, especially when it comes wrapped in family, forgiveness, and the idea that people can change. King Charles believed that deeply. He didn't just open the door, he chose to ignore the risk attached to it. But was it kindness or was it vulnerability disguised as strength?
Of course he's going to say yes. He's a kind man, really, the king. He's not going to not want to see his grandchildren.
Okay, is he a weak man, though, Jobbo, too?
Yeah, but, it's difficult, isn't it? You're living with cancer. You've got a certain amount of finite time in your life. I mean, he's seeing all sorts of people behind the scenes. Michael Fawcett, who was got rid of as well. A lot of people being seen in this period because, of course, a man without living with that, he doesn't know how long he's got. And so he's not going to turn that down. And that may be seen as weakness, but it certainly wouldn't have happened on the Queen's watch. the late Queen's watch. I don't think it would happen if it was Prince William.
Because what happened next made many people believe William had seen something that others had missed. From his point of view, he thought he understood exactly how she handled difficult situations. He believed she planned carefully, thought several steps ahead, and would use any opportunity that came her way if it benefited her. King Charles, wanting to be the bigger person, chose forgiveness. He agreed to the meeting. He decided to give her another chance because he believed in grace. And William watched his father make that decision, convinced it would not end the way everyone hoped. And that's where the tension locks into place. One person offering grace, another watching, already bracing for impact. Because what if forgiveness wasn't being received as forgiveness at all, but as opportunity?
Children were primary. Harry was very low down secondary, and Meghan was not even tertiary. She was way in the back line. But to receive Meghan and do it the way they did was to drive home a point to an adversary.
Just 48 hours later, many people felt William's prediction had come true. To them, that's what experience looks like. After seeing the same kinds of situations again and again, you start recognizing familiar patterns. You pay attention to how people act, how they make decisions, and what those choices can lead to. 48 hours. That's all it took. Not weeks, not months, 2 days. And suddenly, whispers turned into headlines. Private became public. And the timeline, this precise, almost surgical sequence, started raising uncomfortable questions. Because coincidence doesn't usually move this fast. Not with this level of detail. Not with this kind of precision. King Charles has often been seen as someone who values forgiveness over conflict. After years of very public family tensions, including the Netflix series where his son shared personal grievances and the book describing private conversations, the king still agreed to move forward. King Charles chose forgiveness knowing the history, knowing the risks, knowing exactly what had happened before when private conversations became public narratives. And still, he opened that door again. Why? Was it hope, or was it something deeper, a need to believe that this time would be different? Fathers at his age often still hope their children will make better choices. They keep believing that reconciliation is possible even after years of painful family tension. And that's the part that changes everything. Because this wasn't just strategy. This wasn't just public image. This was personal, emotional. A father hoping against evidence, against warnings that things could still be repaired. But what if that hope was exactly what made the situation so fragile? And that's when the story stops being about a single meeting and starts becoming about a sequence, a chain reaction that feels too precise, too structured, too deliberate to ignore. Because once that door at Highgrove opened, once those private conversations began, everything that followed seemed to move with unsettling speed, like events were already lined up waiting to fall into place. Day one didn't look like a scandal. It looked like healing, a quiet meeting, careful conversations, sensitive topics kept contained. There were discussions about grandchildren, about family, about the kind of things people talk about when they're trying to rebuild something that has been fractured for years. It was controlled, it was contained, and most importantly, it was supposed to stay private. That was the understanding. That was the condition. No leaks, no briefings, no narratives forming outside those walls, just a family trying, perhaps desperately, to find a way back to each other. But even within that calm surface, there were details that didn't quite sit right. Conversations that stayed deliberately narrow. Focus that never drifted too far into the past. Almost as if certain topics were being avoided, not forgotten, not forgiven, just carefully sidestepped. And that raises a quiet but powerful question. Was the meeting truly about reconciliation, or was it about access? Because by the evening of that same day, the rules were clear. Silence was not optional. It was essential. Everyone understood it. Everyone agreed to it, or at least that's what it seemed. But silence, when it's broken this quickly, doesn't feel like a mistake. It feels like a decision. And then the clock started ticking. Within that narrow 48-hour window, something shifted. Reports began to surface. Not vague rumors, not speculative noise. Specific details, timelines, conversations, enough clarity to make people pause and ask, where did this come from? Because information like that doesn't just appear. It travels. It's carried. And when it arrives so quickly, it suggests it didn't have far to go. That's when the focus turned to People magazine, not just as a publication, but as a pattern. Critics didn't just question the leak, they questioned the pathway. Why that platform? Why that timing? Why those details? And suddenly, what might have been dismissed as coincidence started to feel coordinated. Because when the same outlet consistently becomes the destination for private narratives, it stops looking accidental. The reaction didn't build slowly. It surged. What started as concern turned into backlash, and what looked like frustration evolved into something much larger. The reported boycott numbers 1.5 million, then growing, weren't just statistics. They were signals, indicators that something had shifted in how people were interpreting these events. Because people don't react that strongly without feeling that a line has been crossed. And then the narrative expanded. It wasn't just about the meeting anymore, it was about everything connected to it. Invictus, media partnerships, financial questions that had been quietly sitting in the background suddenly moved into the spotlight. Critics began asking why certain events cost what they did, why funding seemed disproportionate, why transparency felt limited. And once those questions start, they don't stay contained. They spread. At the same time, subtle changes began appearing in public behavior. Appearances that once felt unified started looking separate. Events attended alone. Absences that didn't go unnoticed. And while no one outside those relationships can confirm what those moments mean, they create space for speculation. Because when patterns shift, people notice. Meanwhile, Catherine remained steady, focused, controlled, almost untouched by the chaos surrounding everything else. And that contrast, whether intentional or not, became part of the story. Because while one narrative grew louder, another stayed silent. And sometimes silence, especially in moments like this, speaks louder than anything else. But the deeper tension isn't in the headlines, it's in what they suggest. Because this doesn't feel like a single incident. It feels like a continuation, a pattern that some believe has been building for years, now reaching a point where it can't be ignored anymore. Supporters of Williams' view argue this isn't about proving anything, it's about recognizing something that was already there. And that's what makes the ending feel unfinished. Because nothing here actually resolves. The questions remain. The trust that was extended, the silence that was broken, the timing that doesn't quite make sense, it all lingers. And as more people look back at those original warnings, at those quiet observations that didn't seem urgent at the time, the story begins to shift.